So far in our You versus shows, we've pitted you against some very tough opposition, from superheroes to predatory aliens to the living dead. We haven't really given you much of a chance, seeing as these characters seem to rub people out with ease and have proved themselves to be close to indestructible. So you might welcome today's show, in which we will give you perhaps an easier fight. John Wick is no pushover, but this time, we fancy your chances. So who's John Wick? We imagine most of you have seen the movies, but just in case you haven't, we'll give you a quick rundown. Mr. Wick was a hitman, but he decided to hang up his gloves, or should we say gun, when he fell in love with a woman. His story is kind of a biblical tale in that he's a man that has done very bad things but decides to turn over a new leaf. John's life takes a turn for the worse when his wife dies from a terminal illness. And then to make matters worse, the dog he had received to help him get over the loss of his wife is killed by some rather unethical characters. Now we have a tale of revenge and retribution. John goes on a killing spree, and he kicks a lot of behinds. In the next movie, he's more entrenched in this underworld of vicious killers, but anyone who comes up against John is hardly a match. He kills henchmen like you eat Skittles. He takes out assassins with as much ease as you take out the trash. And he deals with assassins, well, he deals with them, but not without incurring a few cuts and bruises. At the end of part 2, there's a global contract out on him. But John's way of looking at things is whoever tries to take him out will end up being taken out themselves. We, his supporters, believe him. Part 3 isn't out yet, but we're told the underscoring theme will align with a famous Roman military adage which goes, if you want peace, prepare for war. We're told he will also have a hit woman helping him out, but we don't expect you to have to fight her too. As we write, the film is still a month or two from coming out, so you get off easy. So how would you succeed where some of the world's most dangerous assassins have failed? John Wick is basically hunted down by the most skilled killers on planet Earth, and he keeps winning. We don't mean to undermine the fact that you have a black belt in karate, and after watching MMA took 4 jiu-jitsu lessons. We know some of you creatine drinkers and steroid abusers are twice the size of John Wick, and that he's not exactly a spring chicken. But could you kill a man that it seems just cannot die? If we look at what we might call his powers and strengths, we should first say that John Wick seems to have nothing to lose. He tried to make things right in his life and life just kicked him in the face. Consider that you probably do have a lot to lose, and John Wick already has an advantage over you. He is fearless, and this existential crisis he's been going through makes him dangerous. Most of you likely cry over spilled milk, so let's just say in a battle of wills, you lose. In terms of physical skills relating to you getting your head pulverized by John Wick, we should tell you that John was a Marine before he became a contract killer. It's in the Marines where he learned some of his skills that would serve him well when he joined the world of criminals. He soon got the name the Boogeyman because of his remarkable talents to make people disappear. His acumen for easily dispensing of people caught the eye of gangsters, with Russian mobster Vigo Tarasov being particularly impressed with the way John killed 3 men with nothing but a pencil. We might warn you here not to fight John Wick in a stationery store. What else are you up against, besides a guy that can send you to eternity with a Stedler HB? Well, he has incredible reflexes. He's not only good at handing out beatings, but he's also very hard to hit. On top of that, he's extremely clever at understanding what's happening around him. His situational awareness is almost superhuman, but not quite. Here's an example of his quick thinking as pointed out on his fandom page. Marcus shoots John Wick's pillow in order to alert him to a threat. It takes him only 1.2 seconds to understand the shot's purpose, correctly assess the situation, and react effectively. Could you do that? Not likely. He has an amazing tolerance for pain. While most of us might feel sorry for ourselves when we get bashed on the end of our nose or step on a piece of Lego, John Wick can take a thorough beating and seem not to care at all. He even purposely let someone stab him, just because that he knew that if he did that, he could win the fight. Let's just say that if our fight with Mr. Wick became a war of attrition, he would no doubt last longer. The fact is, unless you have his head in a vice, it is unlikely that he will submit to you. At the same time, if your fight is up close, remember that Mr. Wick is very skilled at Judo, Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Krav Maga. It's likely that he'll have no problem dispatching the mouthy Irish fighter Conor McGregor, and would likely make easy work of anyone at your local gym. The fact is, we don't think any of you would beat him in a hand-to-hand scrap, so just don't go there. So we might think about weapons. We might remind you though that John Wick has extensive weapons training, and as part of the underworld he can get his hands on all sorts of powerful guns you might not be able to find. Okay, so if you're an American, getting your hands on a gun might be as difficult as buying ice cream. But we doubt you can come up with an arsenal to match John Wick's. On top of that, he's a master marksman, and most of you have only mastered marksmanship in the virtual world. If he finds out you're out to get him, expect to be on your guard at all times. What else? Well, he's a master tactician, but he's also very hard to find. He can get in and out of places easily. So if he's after you, don't think a security guard in your building or a double lock on the door will be much good. He also knows a lot of people in the underworld, and they might help him out. At the same time, he's fluent in English, Russian, Italian, Hebrew, as well as sign language. So finding information for him is easier than it is for you. If he comes after you in a car, he will catch you. John Wick is an expert driver. Okay, so now the task is starting to sound a bit overwhelming, and you're thinking that you'll leave this job to someone else. Maybe collecting the bounty for Mr. Wick is more hassle than it's worth. But we must now tell you how you might win this fight. Maybe it's not as hard as you think. John's main weakness is the fact that he's just too human. All too human. He's angry. You could even say he is the very personification of wrath. You might take advantage of this. Make him even more angry. Make that rage of his spill over so he makes mistakes. We suggest you might do this by invoking his dead wife. Perhaps do something as nasty as desecrating her grave. Hey, we know it's pretty awful, but don't shoot the messenger. We're just trying to help you win. If he's seething, he will come out, expose himself, and as we said, you'll not beat this man hand to hand. It's got to be done from a safe distance. We know he got beat up by 3 men in that first movie, but we honestly don't think you should attempt this kind of thing. Your approach is more subtle. So you've desecrated his wife's grave. What you know about John Wick is the fact that he'll return to that grave. In the best of worlds, you'll have an armed military drone. But according to British media, while the US does not export these things, the UK bought 10 Reaper and Predator drones from the US. They're not exactly easy to get your hands on. The US says that you'll have to make a good case for buying one of these drones, and they can certainly not be used for unlawful force against domestic populations. You can buy sniper rifles though, and we found a few places where that can be done. Business Insider even has an article titled, "Yes, you can buy a 50 caliber sniper rifle online." In that article we can read, you have to pass that background check, no convictions for crazy or criminal acts. Aside from that, it only comes down to the rifle being legal in the state you're planning to keep it, and legal in the state you bought it. So this is how you take out John Wick from a distance with a rifle. You've brought him out to the open by exploiting his rage, and you know for a fact that one place he goes is his wife's grave. He's out in the open, and there's little to no security where his dear lost love lives. You have told no one about your task, because you're aware he knows everyone who inhabits the underground. It's just you and him. Prior to your date with him, you've practiced with that rifle to the extent that you can hit an apple from 200 meters. You've also bought a laser rangefinder to make the job easier. Reading about sniper rifles, we hear that a good marksman should have no problem hitting a human shape from 800 meters. So let's just say that you wait for John around 300 to 500 meters away. We don't know what kind of gun you have, but the US military says some weapons have a maximum effective range of up to 2,300 meters. You should be safe at your 300 to 500 meters. You just better hope for the right conditions, and if you don't get them, you might want to wait and try again another day. The reason, of course, is because we believe that if you miss John, you won't get another shot. He will find you, and he will kill you. Somewhere just past what can be seen, measured, and quantified by human eyes and brains is another place, a place of shapes beyond the shapes, described as the void which surrounds and encapsulates our own universe. This macroverse is home to things the human mind cannot comprehend, for their forms and minds have no basis in our own reality. We have no comparison for these shapeless void things in our prime material existence, and cannot hope to ever comprehend the truth of these exocosmic horrors. Pennywise the Dancing Clown is one of these horrors, a being as ancient as pre-creation, who existed possibly as long as God, or the Other, who is widely believed to be the creator of all things in the world and all others. Passing from the uncreation of the macroverse to the creation of our own universe, it's incomprehensibly ancient and has wandered the cosmos, feasting on all life it encounters like a universal parasite. Recently, it found its way to Earth, taking up residence in Derry, Maine. Although some believe that it arrived long ago in a massive cataclysmic event similar to an asteroid impact, and seeing a young world full of the promise of life settled in for a long sleep, awaiting for the inevitable rise of its favorite prey, intelligent life. Suppose that one day you found yourself on a road trip through beautiful Maine, enjoying its famous lobster bisque and gorgeous coastal vistas, when suddenly you stop for an overnight stay in the quiet town of Derry. The people are pleasant enough, but as you stroll through town, you can't help but notice all the posters for missing children. Doing a little more research, you are stunned to discover that great catastrophes and a large number of missing children seem to come in predictable cycles to this unfortunate town every 27 to 30 years. With growing horror, you realize that it's now officially been 27 years since the last bout of missing children, and that's when you see it. A figure watching you from the tree line. It looks like a clown, with brightly colored pants and a shirt, tufts of red hair, and stark white face with pouty red lips. You blink and suddenly it's gone, and realization breeds a terrible fear inside you as you understand that you are now its new prey. So you're being stalked and terrorized by an interdimensional being who feasts on humans. How can you defeat it? First, let's take a look at what you're up against. Pennywise's true origins are unknown, past that it comes from the space beyond space, a region known as the macroverse that exists outside our own reality. This place might also be the deadliest, a place that Pennywise sometimes exiles the souls of its victims to, leaving their bodies as empty shells. However, the deadlights and the macroverse may be two completely separate locations, but what's known is that the human mind risks insanity if it ever catches a glimpse of either. Formless voids that defy the orderly nature of our own existence. A human brain effectively shuts down if it's exposed to either the deadlights or the macroverse, bringing on instant lunacy. Pennywise's origin from within this formless void forces him, or more accurately, it, to adopt a physical shape for as long as it exists in our reality. That gives Pennywise incredible powers of shapeshifting, able to take on the form of any person or object. However, it's bound to the rules of our own universe's physics, meaning that if it takes on the shape of a bird, for instance, then it must fly like one and cannot defy the laws of physics. The obedience to the rules of our universe means that Pennywise's shapeshifting can leave it temporarily vulnerable. If it shapeshifts into a cabinet and you set it on fire, it'll burn. However, Pennywise also has incredible resistance to physical damage and near invulnerability. Even being shot in the head won't stop Pennywise for long, or even give him much pause. If you've seen our previous episodes, then you know that we here at the Infographics Show abide by one belief: problem solving through superior firepower. In this case, however, no amount of firepower is going to put a dent in Pennywise, at least not until you overcome its psychic defenses first. As a creature with psychic abilities, Pennywise uses its abilities to manipulate its victims into greatly fearing it, stating that fear salts the meat. In fact, Pennywise refuses to eat people unless they're good and properly terrified, having grown a taste for scared children. Complete invulnerability to physical damage and an immortal lifespan, and the ability to escape into the deadlights, this time you're up against a formidable challenge indeed. Luckily though, Pennywise does have one glaring weakness: its narcissism. A being of superior power, Pennywise believes that humans are far beneath it, and centuries of preying on hapless people have given it a serious ego boost. Yet, powerful as Pennywise is, that staggering ego is a crippling Achilles heel, for it is completely incapable of believing that it could ever be resisted, let alone overcome by a mere human. When a group of children forced it to retreat in the 1950s during one of its feeding cycles, Pennywise awoke 3 decades later and for the first time questioned its own power and abilities. A being as ancient as the universe, and likely even more, tasted defeat for the first time, and it left it with crippling self-doubt. Pennywise's self-doubt is going to be the vulnerability you're going to exploit, but first, you have to be able to resist its fear-based attacks against you. That means you're going to have to learn to control your own fear, as when Pennywise can't terrify its prey, it clearly loses power over them, and that even translates to growing physically weaker in our own universe, becoming vulnerable to damage that it would normally shrug off without a second thought. So we're not going to do as usual and recommend this weapon or that, or this trap or that. Rather, the first thing we're going to recommend is that you take some yoga classes immediately. Pick up meditation habits and make it a routine to center yourself and empty your mind. Pennywise will try to flood you with fear, and it will be important that you're able to push those fears out of your mind. Move to West Hollywood and take up classes in a local yoga studio. Maybe start eating kale for every meal and start going to obscure indie band concerts. You need to get as spiritual as any LA hipster and prepare for the ultimate confrontation. Once you've started saying namaste instead of hello and goodbye in every conversation, you're ready for your confrontation. But beware, because Pennywise will prey on your deepest personal fears. It won't be enough to simply push fear out of your mind through superior meditative powers. You'll need to have physically faced those deepest fears you have and overcome them, because you can be sure that in a fight against Pennywise, he's going to summon them against you. Pennywise's power to create illusions is so strong that they can even physically hurt people. So if you're afraid of swimming in the ocean because of great white sharks, you better be ready to face down a few great white sharks, because that's exactly what Pennywise is going to be throwing at you. Psychologists recommend exposure therapy to get over severe phobias, and we recommend the same for preparing in your fight against Pennywise. Gradual exposure to deep fears can help you overcome them by putting them in perspective and by slowly acclimating the fear inside of you until it becomes normal. Go swim in the ocean if you're afraid of sharks, and once you're accustomed to that, step it up a notch and maybe fly to a tropical island or somewhere with a program that lets you swim with live sharks. Once you've done that, go swimming with sharks while tying bloody stakes to your body. If you survive that, then you're ready to face Pennywise. Assuming you weren't bitten in two by a great white shark because you decided to turn yourself into a meat popsicle, your actual confrontation with Pennywise will be quite brief. It will try to taunt you, summon your deepest fears, and launch them at you, to which you'll simply laugh and shrug them away. At this point, fear will grow inside of Pennywise as it realizes that it has no power over you. Cornering the sniveling clown, it'll likely beg for its life and make all sorts of promises if you just let it go. Everything from bringing dead relatives back to life to making you nearly immortal yourself. Don't listen to it. Just take your preferred weapon of choice or even a simple children's baseball bat and finish the job. Without the power to terrify you, Pennywise's physical powers diminish as well. And though it's never certain if it can truly die, you'll at least have liberated the town of Derry for another 30 years. Just beware that Pennywise typically reverts to its true form when close to defeat, and the closest approximation in our universe to its true form is that of a giant spider. So while we personally don't find spiders particularly terrifying, the sudden appearance of a giant spider the size of a house would no doubt be terrifying to anyone, so try not to be suddenly scared to death of a mega-sized arachnid when you're so close to victory. Although if you were, honestly, we wouldn't blame you, even if that means Pennywise likely bit your head off in the end. Everyone loves Halloween. It's that time of year where people get to dress up in spooky costumes, eat a bunch of candy, and be brutally murdered by a superhuman psychopathic killer. For 30 years, Michael Myers has stalked our nightmares, and Halloween is his time to shine. Incessantly driven on a quest to murder his family members, Michael keeps coming back time and time again looking to finish his evil quest. How well do you know your family's background? Could you be related to Michael Myers? If so, what would you do if he came after you? Hello and welcome to another special episode of the Infographics Show. Today we're pitting you up against the classic Halloween slasher, Michael Myers. Born on October 19, 1957, Michael Myers was only 6 years old when he brutally murdered his teenage sister, Judith, complaining of bizarre, inexplicable nightmares and a voice in his head that told him to do bad things. Michael's dreams were filled with flashbacks to events that happened centuries ago in medieval Europe. Michael dreamed of a 15-year-old boy named Enda. Deformed by a midwife's botched delivery and shunned by his community, Enda had nevertheless fallen in love with a Celtic princess named Deidre. When her father called for suitors, Enda approached the king and asked for her hand in marriage, only to be rejected and laughed at by all present, to include his own father. Confident he could make Deidre love him if he could simply get to her, Enda secretly followed her to a river one day. Approaching her, Deidre mistook his intentions and became frightened, nearly falling into the river. When Enda tried to rescue her, Deidre believed he was trying to rape her and fled. Heartbroken by the accusation and humiliation, Enda was driven to madness, and later, on the Celtic holiday of Samhain, he viciously attacked Deidre and Culian both, killing the couple. The village turned on Enda and brutally murdered him in return, with the king having his shaman curse Enda's soul to forever wander the earth until the end of time, repeating his crime. Possessed by Enda's spirit, a 6-year-old Michael killed his older sister Judith on Halloween night, and then sat outside on the front yard and waited for the police to arrest him. He was sent to Smith's Grove Sanitarium and became the patient of psychiatrist Dr. Sam Loomis, who spent 15 years with young Michael. Per Dr. Loomis, he spent 8 years trying to reach the pint-sized murderer, and then 7 after that, trying to keep him locked up forever, because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil. On October 30th, 1978, Michael broke out of his room in Smiths Grove Sanitarium, but not before carving the word sister on his door. What followed was a long journey trying to track down his surviving younger sister so he could murder her, all the while hounded by Dr. Loomis, who would do his best to recapture the renegade psychopath. So let's say that you're checking your family tree and one day you suddenly feel a cold chill as you realize you're second cousins with someone in the infamous Myers family tree. And to make matters worse, you look up and realize that the date on the calendar is October 30th, just one day until Halloween. What would you do? How could you survive an encounter with Michael Myers? First, you have to know what you're up against. Afflicted by the curse of Thorn, Myers is for all intents and purposes simply unkillable. It was said that hell wouldn't accept him, and so Myers is denied an afterlife either in the pearly gates or in the depths of fiery hell, which unluckily for us means he's stuck to wander the earth forever. Not only is Michael immortal though, he is superhumanly strong, able to lift full-grown men into the air with just one arm, or jam his thumbs through somebody's skull. Along with his super strength is his super endurance, as Myers seems to never physically tire, and is all but invulnerable to life-threatening injuries to include being shot in the head. He may have a healing factor that allows him to regenerate vital organs, or perhaps he's simply zombified and lives purely as a corpse animated by evil alone. Either way, he's one tough cookie. And if all that wasn't enough, Myers also has the extraordinary ability to sneak better than the most accomplished international jewel thief, making it impossible to sneak up on him and likely making you the one who will be getting snuck up on. So, as you may have learned from some of our previous videos, picking your battlefield is often the key difference between life and death. When faced with a superhuman monster such as Michael, you're going to want every advantage you can get, while denying him the same. This means you're going to want to fight somewhere where Michael can't effectively sneak up on you. So boarded up, abandoned houses in the middle of the night or old lumber mills are out of the question. Instead, we recommend a nice big empty stadium. The large open field will give Michael no cover to hide behind, and the powerful lights will make it impossible for Michael to have a single shadow to sneak behind. But given his intelligence, it's likely he'll figure out a way to shut the lights off on you, which is bad news. So instead, wage your battle to the death at daytime so lighting is not an issue. No cover to hide behind and no shadows to skulk through. Now you're turning the odds against him, but you're going to still have to find a way to take down 200 pounds of murder that can't die. If you're a fan of our other videos, then you know that here at the Infographics Show, we're big believers in problem solving through superior firepower. And it doesn't get much more superior than the US military's M240 Bravo machine gun. A general-purpose machine gun, the M240 is an equal opportunity ass-kicking machine, easily taking on enemy personnel and lightly armored vehicles, firing a 7.62mm round at a rate of 950 rounds per minute. The M240 can reach out and hurt someone almost 4,000 meters away. That's a lot of ouch being delivered at over 2,800 feet per second, giving each 7.62mm round incredible kinetic energy. But unfortunately for us, Michael seems generally unfazed by ballistics. So this time, we're gonna have to change our usual tactic of shoot it a bunch with big guns until it dies, with science. You're not going to win this fight with brawn, so let's win it with brains. What you want to do is have built a secret pit with a trapdoor in advance in the middle of your battlefield. Now, for a mass-murdering, literally evil incarnate, immortal psychopath, Michael is pretty clever and similar tactics have been tried before. However, if there's one thing that Michael absolutely hates, it's the same thing as every 80s horror villain in history: promiscuity. And if there's another thing Michael has a blind, all-consuming rage for, it's his sister. We're not going to spell it out for you, and we'd rather leave the details out, but you're basically going to have to make a very powerful lure for Michael. And seeing as both of his sisters are long dead, well, you're going to have to get very creative. At least maybe now you can find a use for that blow-up doll you bought as a, quote, joke, unquote, and then stashed away in shame. Anyways, whatever your clever ploy is, and we cannot stress enough that we really don't want to know the details, it should be enough to lure Michael into blind rage toward you. With a head full of murder, Michael should fall easy prey for your secret trapdoor, and fall into the prepared pit that you have waiting for him. But what do you fill the pit with that can be lethal to something that can't die? Venomous snakes? Spikes? Flamethrowers? Venomous snakes carrying spikes that are on fire? This is where science comes to the rescue. Fluoroantimonic acid is one of the most powerful acids known to man. With a pH of negative 31.3, it's 100,000 billion times more potent than stomach acid. And no, we did not make up that number. It's so powerful that it can only be stored in specialized containers, because not only would it eat through a glass bottle, it would continue eating through the table that it rests on. We think you know where this is going. Michael may be able to handle being set on fire, stabbed in the heart, and shot in the brain, but we'd like to see what kind of evil can withstand its molecular bonds being ripped apart by fluoroantimonic acid. In the world of evil spirits, it turns out that the ultimate exorcist may just be chemistry. It's late at night and you and your girlfriend are driving down a lonely country road somewhere in the heart of Texas. Your girlfriend points out how clear the night skies are all the way out here, and she asks you to pull the car over so you can have a romantic moment under the stars. You point out that you're in the middle of nowhere, maybe it's not so smart to stop, but she's insistent. So grudgingly you pull the car over. Gazing at the Milky Way laid out before you, you have to admit she's right. It really is beautiful out here. Then suddenly, you think you hear the sound of a twig snapping. Alert, you look around, but your girlfriend insists it's nothing. Relaxing your guard, you hear another twig snap, just at the edge of your headlights. This time, you know there's something there. Worriedly, you say you should get back in the car, and reaching for your keys, you drop them like a klutz. Bending over to pick them up, you suddenly hear it, the sound of a raging chainsaw. And from out of the darkness comes the legendary human skin-wearing Leatherface. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Infographics Show. Today we're putting you, the average Joe, up against the chainsaw-wielding psychopath from Texas, Leatherface. Leatherface is originally from Texas, where he lives with his family who cook the people he kills and make them into chili and other foods to be sold at his father's gas station. Though his iconic weapon is a chainsaw, Leatherface has used everything from his bare fists to sledgehammers to kill his victims. Or he might just incapacitate them and hang them up on meat hooks so he can skin them alive. As a skin connoisseur, Leatherface has a fixation on making clothes out of his victim's skin, much like real serial killer Ed Gein, whom it's thought that Leatherface was based off of. Whatever the inspiration, Leatherface will famously fashion his victim's skin into a mask to wear, though the exact reasoning for this is unknown. Given the fact that Leatherface is likely either autistic or mentally retarded, he may not even be aware of the horror he inflicts or the inappropriateness of wearing other people's faces as masks. Leatherface is the first opponent we featured, which does not have any sort of superhuman or supernatural abilities. Terrifying as he may be, Leatherface is a normal person, albeit quite a bit bigger than most people, standing over 6 feet 5 inches in height. Facing off against Leatherface, pardon the pun, means you're going to be going up against an individual who has no increased abilities or powers, perhaps giving you the best fighting chance of any opponent we've featured thus far in U-Versus. However, you're going to have to watch out for the fact that Leatherface is also quite strong, able to lift an adult person 2 to 3 feet in the air and onto a meat hook. And that takes some serious upper body strength, so you're probably not going to want to get into a punching match. Leatherface also has some resistance to pain, and this may be physiological, such as the inability to feel pain for people who suffer from anhidrosis. Seeing as Leatherface does react to pain, however, it's likely that he's simply psychologically better able to handle extreme amounts of pain compared to the normal person. As our first opponent who doesn't feature any supernatural, superhuman, or other types of powers, we thought it would be only fair for you to fight on a level playing field. That means no access to high-powered weapons, military tech, or any of the explosive goodness we're so fond of here at the Infographics Show. Instead, we're putting you in the shoes of his recent victim, and we'll show you how to survive and defeat Texas's most legendary serial killer. You wake up hanging on a meat hook. The pain is severe, but thanks to the shock, you're not in complete agony. Also, the meat hook hasn't penetrated all the way through your body. Instead, it's pierced through the back muscles just under your shoulder. So bleeding out isn't an immediate threat. Looking across from you, though, is your unfortunate girlfriend. Seeing as her face is already gone, it's clearly too late for her. Oh well, you warned her it was a dumb idea to stop and stare at the stars. First things first, you're gonna have to grab onto the chain above your head and lift yourself off the meat hook. No doubt an extremely painful experience, but you're up against Leatherface, so you better get used to pain. Once you hop off the hook, there's a bit of good news. If you haven't already bled to death, that means that the hook didn't pierce anything too vital. Still, you're gonna want to try to seal that wound up best you can. Rip your shirt in half and tie it around your upper body so it makes a giant bandage. And make sure to tie it up tight. Don't bother with cleaning the wound, you don't have time. And realistically speaking, we doubt Leatherface sanitizes his meat hooks in between killings, so you're probably already screwed on the infection end of things. You sort of have bigger problems to worry about right now. Next, you're going to want to get yourself armed. If you're in a shed, then it's likely there's plenty of improvised weapons just lying around. You might be tempted to go for a sledgehammer or other such heavy weapon, but here's the thing, you're going to have to get up close and personal to use that sledgehammer. And with a gaping wound on your back, taking a few swings with a heavy sledgehammer is going to wear you out and tear the wound open. Plus, Leatherface is a big guy, and he'll have a nasty chainsaw that'll cut you to pieces at close range. It's going to be best to keep your distance. Instead, find a rake or a spade perhaps, and leaning the head against a wall, kick the wooden shaft just below the head as hard as you can. Presto, you have yourself a spear with a wicked sharp end now that the wood is fractured and splintered. The spear is thought to be the first hunting item humanity ever invented, and with the ability to keep hungry lions at a distance, it's clear why. Keep in mind, you're not going to be throwing your spear. That would require a really sharp tip, and for it to be balanced correctly, which your makeshift spear definitely isn't. You're going to be making sure Leatherface keeps his distance or risk getting a gut full of splinters. That's where you'll be aiming, by the way, the gut. Because your spear is pretty primitive and doesn't have a solid or sharp head, you're going to want to make sure you avoid sticking any bony areas of the body. Instead, go for the soft, fleshy bits, places where you can sink your spear in deep and do some serious structural damage. It doesn't matter if Leatherface can resist pain, having several inches of spear thrust into his belly is going to lead to some serious blood loss. It likely won't be fatal as it can take upwards of a half an hour to die from a stomach wound, but it's going to definitely slow him down, and maybe even open up an opportunity to get in a killing stroke. Spears are great, but you're always going to want to have a backup plan. Next, you're going to want something for close quarters, but something you could pull out in an emergency. You might be tempted to go for the shears. They are, after all, nice and sharp, but they're also unwieldy, and in a panic, if you grab them the wrong way, you might end up cutting yourself. Instead, opt for a decent length screwdriver, something between 4 and 6 inches long. That length will ensure you penetrate deep enough into vital areas to achieve a killing blow, such as eyes, ears, and throat. But it isn't so long and unwieldy that it's useless if you get into a wrestling match with Leatherface. Next, you want to find yourself some barbed wire. This is Texas. If you're gonna get strung up on a meat hook and some random killer's tool shed, there's definitely gonna be barbed wire laying around. You're going to want to make a trip line out of the barbed wire, so find a place where you can lure Leatherface to that has only one point of entry. You're also going to want to make sure that the actual entryway is dark, with little if any direct light shining on it. That's because you're going to make an ankle-high trip line by stringing the barbed wire from one end to the other. It's vital that you keep the wire right around ankle height. If you place it too high, then it's likely Leatherface will just simply crash through it. You want to exploit physics by placing the trip line so low that Leatherface's center of gravity is too high up for him to compensate when he starts falling forward and trips over like a pendulum. Keeping the trip line in the shadows will help hide it, but you're not done. You're going to place a second trip line about face level, only this one you're going to make sure isn't as tightly fastened. With a pair of pliers, you're going to then turn the individual barbs of wire so that they face parallel to the wire and outwards at the approaching Leatherface. This will ensure that the physical profile of the wire is very small, so as Leatherface rushes forward, he isn't able to see it in the dark. But it'll also serve another much diabolic purpose. Your last preparation will be to find some turpentine, or something similarly irritating such as paint thinner, which again should be easy to find in a Texas tool shed. Once you got it, sprinkle it pretty liberally over both of the barbed wire trip lines. And for good measure, go ahead and pour it over the end of your spear. Once you're ready and armed, go ahead and call out to Leatherface. Unlike most psychopaths, he doesn't seem to have any particular weakness to insults or taunts. So just play scared. Scream and cry, maybe yell about how badly you don't want your skin turned into a mask. Leatherface should quickly respond, looking to secure his final kill. As he rushes through the booby-trap doorway, he'll run into both trip lines simultaneously. The first line down at his ankles will cut into his ankle flesh and trip him, causing him to fall. The second line will catch him in the face, and because you fastened it more loosely than the first, the force of him falling will cause it to yield as he falls, instead of simply stopping the fall. As he falls and the second line gives way, it will severely gouge his face, hopefully scoring some pretty deep lacerations around his eyes. Turpentine coating will magnify the pain of the cuts, both on his face and his ankles, and if any of the barbs manage to actually cut across his eyes, severely irritate him and cause him to tear up, effectively blinding him. Now, you've got Leatherface on the ground, but he's not going to stay there for long. If you can, spear him while he's on the ground, aiming just left of where the shoulder meets the neck. Coming from a downward angle, if properly aimed, your spear will avoid all of the bones in the shoulder and will cut into Leatherface's torso along or next to the esophagus, avoiding any rib bones as well. If you manage this, congratulations, because that's going to be an instant kill. If, however, Leatherface stumbles up, take advantage of his temporary blindness to ram your spear through his gut, but really put your shoulder into it. You want to not just stab him through the midsection, but you want to drive him backwards and back over the same ankle-high tripwire he just tripped on. That's going to put Leatherface flat on his back, spear in his belly, and eyes blinded with cuts and stinging turpentine. This is a good time to run. Sure, you could take your chances and jump on top of Leatherface, finishing him off with your handy stabbing screwdriver, but for any of you that have seen Game of Thrones, you might well remember the mountain's most infamous scene. Do what any self-defense expert will tell you and don't take any chances. Leatherface is down for the count, go ahead and make a run for it. If you were trapped in Leatherface's kill shed, how would you escape? How would you defeat Leatherface? You're rummaging through a garage sale one Saturday afternoon with your family when suddenly you hear your younger sister squeal. In a panic, you dash to the dimly lit garage, only to find your sister cooing with delight as she looks on at a rather strange and old-looking porcelain doll. The doll looks like she was made half a century ago, but your little sister doesn't care. She wants it and she wants it now. Caving, your mom decides that sure, it's creepy, but it's also surely an antique and who knows, maybe it's valuable. Taking the doll home, you can't help but feel like every time you look over your shoulder at the back seat, it seems to be looking back at you. But that's impossible. It's just a stupid doll. The cars jostling on the bumpy road probably just knocked her eyes that way. But then, later that night, as you're laying in bed, you hear the bedroom door open with an agonizingly slow squeak. You know you have to roll over and look to see what's there at your door, but part of your panicking mind already knows, and it doesn't want to see. At last, you roll on your back and look over, and there she is, Annabelle, the demon doll from hell, and she has a smile just for you. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Infographics show's You Versus. Today we're putting you up against the most infamous possessed doll in history, Annabelle. Popularized by the film The Conjuring and subsequent solo films, the real Annabelle is a doll that serves as the host for a demonic entity, accidentally allowed to possess the doll by two women in their late 20s back in the 1970s. Received as a birthday gift, Annabelle's owner would discover the doll in different places around the house and soon started finding pieces of parchment upon which were written the words "Help me, help us." Finally, one day a male friend took a nap on the same bed Annabelle was kept at, and he woke up after feeling like he was being strangled with a doll staring at him. The girls contacted a medium and held a seance, who said that the spirit of a 7-year-old girl named Annabelle Higgins, a prior occupant, was haunting the house, but she wanted to stay with the girls and be loved by them. The girls gave the spirit permission to inhabit the doll, which turned out to be a big mistake, as Annabelle was not really a friendly if mischievous spirit of a young girl, but a full-blown demon who was looking to possess a human host. Annabelle would eventually be locked up in the famous paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren's Museum of the Occult, inside a display case with the words "Warning, positively do not open" written on it. One visitor to the museum scoffed at the warning and taunted the doll, only to be killed on his motorcycle ride back home from the museum. Ever since, Lorraine has warned disbelievers about not heeding her warnings to stay away from Annabelle and other demonic forces. So you decided to poke fun at the myth of a demon-inhabited doll, or perhaps Annabelle managed to scamper out of Ed and Lorraine's museum and into your house. Either way, you're now in a one-on-one deathmatch versus the demon doll from hell. How are you going to beat it? To defeat your enemy, first, you must know your enemy. Annabelle is a demon, which means that she's vulnerable to the same key weaknesses as any other demon: holy water and holding symbols. The key, though, is having true faith while wielding those symbols. A cross isn't going to do you much good if you have no faith that it does in fact represent a higher power with absolute dominion over evil and love for humanity. That's why demons' favorite prey is typically weak-willed holy men with little real faith. Demons are also bound by the laws of the prime material plane, should they manifest physically, meaning that while they may have superior speed and strength compared to the average human, if they take physical form, they're still prone to being harmed. God does not exempt demons or angels from the laws of physics. Annabelle is interesting in that she manifests both spiritually and physically, albeit the latter very infrequently. Typically, she does as most demons and haunts her victims, torturing them psychologically and increasing their fear. For as your fear increases, a demon's strength is also increased. She typically only manifests physically when greatly enraged, in serious danger, or when a victim is truly terrified and close to breaking. This is a key vulnerability that we'll be exploiting in our deathmatch against Annabelle, in both demon and non-demon form. Annabelle also has a formidable talent for telekinesis, which only grows with the horror she induces in her victims. Her power can range from moving toys across the room to outright snapping fingers on a person's hand, making Annabelle one of the most powerful telekinetic demons we've seen. So how are you gonna fight a finger-snapping demon doll from hell? First, as in any confrontation with a demonic entity, you're gonna have to make mental preparations before physical ones. Annabelle's demonic domain seems to be that of fear, meaning she urges her victims to grow increasingly more afraid and thus grow stronger herself. Part of your mental preparations are going to be to get a grip on your fears, because you can bet that Annabelle will be waiting to exploit them. Unlike other demons we've featured though, Annabelle isn't particularly clever and doesn't seem to be able to tap directly into your mind to learn your fears and conjure them. Instead, she plays on the universal fears all humans have of the darkness and the unexpected, manipulating her victims with surprise and simple tricks, using shadows and low-level telekinetics. Take a tip from US Special Operations soldiers and fight your fear before you actually get into combat. Picture your pending confrontation against the demon doll. Try and imagine every possible scare she can throw at you, every creeping shadow she can overwhelm you with in an attempt to terrify you. When the moment comes and the lights get snuffed out, you'll realize that you've been picturing all this before. You know what's coming. Something dreadful will appear in a dark corner, but you're ready because you've been thinking about that dreadful thing in the dark for days now. You may not be able to eliminate your fear entirely, but you've got a pretty good handle on it now. So it's time to start dealing with Annabelle directly. Your primary objective is going to be to destroy Annabelle the doll, as that she is a shell that Annabelle the demon inhabits, and what allows it free reign to enter and exit our world as it pleases. That's likely not going to be easy. For a doll, Annabelle has shown incredible resilience to damage, and the demon isn't going to just let you smash it with a hammer. As soon as Annabelle realizes that her tricks and fear tactics aren't working on you, she's going to start taking a more direct approach. The young man in the 70s who slept in the bed shared by Annabelle felt himself being choked and woke up with scratch marks on his chest. If you're going to try and destroy Annabelle, you bet you're going to be getting quite a bit more than claw marks. This is when Annabelle is going to take physical form, as she's unable to break you mentally, which is that of a 6.5 to 7 foot tall demon with crested horns and onyx black skin. The demon is very strong and capable of tossing adult humans across a room with ease. That's okay, because you're not going to give it a chance to get that close. As soon as Annabelle takes physical form, you're going to introduce her to humanity's crowning achievement in close quarters murder, the AA-12 Adjacent Assault Shotgun. Test fired by the US Marine Corps and other militaries from around the world, the AA-12 features a 20-round drum magazine and is fully automatic, able to fire 5 12-gauge shotgun shells a second. That means that in one 4-second burst, you'll have emptied your drum magazine, but you'll also have perforated Annabelle's demonic body with more holes than a finely aged Swiss cheese. And with its ability to absorb 80% of its recoil through its gas system and another 10% through its recoil spring, that means you as the shooter only experience 10% of the recoil per shot, giving the AA-12 unparalleled accuracy over any other automatic shotgun. As our friend Billy Mays would say, but wait, there's more! It can also come armed with the Frag 12 shotgun cartridge, which turns each shotgun shell into a fragmentation grenade with a cone-shaped blast to keep you safe. That's going to come in handy because demons are incredibly resistant to physical damage, featuring a tough outer hide that isn't easily penetrated. So what you're going to do is you're going to create an alternating loadout in your 20-round drum magazine by loading it with one Frag 12 round, followed by a 12-gauge flechette round filled with 19 metal flechettes capable of penetrating over 1.5 feet of ballistic gel and traveling at a speed of 1,925 feet per second. That means you'll be blasting Annabelle with one explosive round before hitting her with a shotgun spray of flesh-shredding flechettes, immediately followed by another explosive round and another spray of flechettes. If Annabelle's demonic body isn't hamburger meat in 2 seconds flat, just hold the trigger down for another 2 seconds. But that only gets rid of the physical body, and arguably that's the weakest form a demon can take. Now you need to finish the fight and destroy Annabelle the doll. That's not going to be easy, especially after you've turned Annabelle's physical form into a demon-shaped bloodstain and quickly evaporating mist of blood. She's going to be pissed, and she's gonna know you're coming to sever her link to our world. So she's gonna throw everything she's got at you, and with her telekinetic powers, that may be a very literal statement. You better be fast on your feet because you'll be dodging flying furniture and who knows what else. Here's where getting your hands on a holy symbol would be helpful, but unless you have the faith to wield it properly, Annabelle's just gonna laugh it off before probably stabbing you in the face with it. Even if you have faith though, there's Annabelle's telekinesis to deal with, and she's been known to encourage holy men to drop their symbols by systematically snapping their fingers backwards one at a time. To keep that from happening, you can order yourself a custom-made medieval-style gauntlet made of steel and reinforced with iron. Manufacturers such as Wolfland specialize in recreating historical armors and weapons, only with the added benefit of modern smelting and blacksmithing techniques. We wish Annabelle good luck trying to snap the fingers of a stainless steel metal gauntlet. However, odds are you probably lack the true faith necessary to deflect Annabelle's demonic attacks. Don't feel bad. The Warrens are living proof that even the most powerful exorcists can falter in their faith from time to time. Why bother getting in close anyway? Why not keep your distance, like say 110 feet of it? With the XL-18 flamethrower, you can spew fires almost 1,000 degrees hot at a distance of 110 feet, and its 3.3-gallon fuel tank can be loaded with napalm to make sure it's even more devastating. With that much firepower literally at your disposal, Annabelle's telekinetic talents won't matter, and in seconds you'll have turned the little demonic porcelain doll into melted clay and rid the world of her link to our world, at least temporarily, since demons always come back. Armed with the XL-18 flamethrower and the AA-12 automatic shotgun though, humanity can start giving demons serious second thoughts about ever returning again, or until the demons start learning to use shotguns and flamethrowers themselves. Then we're all doomed. It's late in the summer, and you and a friend are out on a charter fishing trip having fun and catching wild salmon in the deep sea. You duck into the cabin real quick to grab some more sunscreen in order to protect yourself from the blistering sun, and while you're inside you hear a brief yell followed by silence. You figure your friend's probably caught a big fish and got excited, but when you step back outside you realize you're all alone on the boat. No friend and no captain either, even stranger. Your friend's fishing pole is gone as well. You scan the sea around you thinking that maybe the two fell in somehow, but from what you can tell, you're all alone in the big blue sea. Leaning over the edge to look at the water below you, you're stunned to spot the massive shape of something swimming below the boat. Suddenly, off to your left, the thing comes to the surface as it does a lazy circle of your boat, and you're terrified to see a shark fin as tall as you are, attached to a shark twice the size of your boat. With icy fear gripping you tightly, you slowly realize that you're definitely going to need a bigger boat. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Infographics show's You Versus. Today we're pitting you, the average Joe, up against the most feared ocean predator of all time, the Megalodon shark. The Megalodon, or the Meg as it's known for short, is believed to be the largest shark to have ever existed. This can be a difficult fact to ascertain because sadly most of a shark's skeleton is made of cartilage, which decomposes quickly after the animal's death, leaving only teeth to fossilize as a record of the animal's existence. Combined with the millions of years of sediment and tectonic shifts that have occurred throughout Earth's history, there could well have been a larger, much rarer shark that existed than the Megalodon, but whose fossils have never been discovered. Megalodon though was plenty big enough, reaching an incredible size of up to 59 feet. That's about the length of a bowling alley or almost the length of 2 telephone poles stacked on top of each other. An absolutely incredible size. And with predators, you know what they say, big size, big teeth. The Megalodon's name literally means big tooth, with each tooth reaching a size of about 7.1 inches, making each tooth so big it would take both your hands to hold it. By comparison, great white sharks have teeth that typically grow about 2 to 3 inches in length and reach a maximum size of around 20 feet. The Megalodon is thought to have varied its hunting strategy depending on the prey it consumed, though generally relied on its oversized jaws and teeth to crush bones and deliver killing blows, while modern great white sharks likes to target the soft underbelly of prey, where its teeth can slash through the flesh and cause massive bleeding. The Meg is believed to have directly targeted areas such as the heart and lungs, breaking through the protective ribcage with its bone-crushing teeth, something which a great white simply doesn't have the power to do. It was not a dumb predator though, and while chasing fast, agile prey, the Meg would often target flippers and fins, ripping them off with one massive bite, so that the prey could no longer outmaneuver the big predator. Like great whites though, the Meg is believed to have targeted its prey from below, swimming up from the depths at great speed before slamming into a prey animal like a bulldozer made out of teeth and fury. And if you thought you'd be safe given your small size and just not worth the effort, think again, as there's plenty of fossil evidence to suggest that megalodons were very opportunistic feeders who would eat anything at all that it had a chance to. We suppose that makes sense considering the massive energy requirements of having such a large body. Now, after millions of years of extinction, the Meg is back and it's coming for you. All we can say is good luck. As usual, to defeat your opponent, you must know your opponent. So what exactly are you up against here? Well, we think we laid it out pretty well up to this point. You're up against the single most feared predator the ocean has ever known, an evolutionary perfect organism who dominated the very top of the food chain for millions of years, and which could only be wiped out by massive climate change and overcompetition for shrinking food resources. Unlike most modern whales, the Meg was a very fast and agile swimmer, despite its size, and it would have had to be in order to catch prey we're pretty sure spent 99% of its lives fleeing from giant predatory sharks. The Meg is also believed to have had a very refined sense of smell, with similar capabilities in detecting bleeding and struggling prey from many miles away. It may even have had the electroreceptive sense of many modern sharks, letting it hunt in even the deepest, darkest waters by detecting the electricity generated by a swimming animal's muscles. In a bit of good news, the Meg may not have had very sharp eyesight, but with such overdeveloped sense of smell, it probably didn't need it. This is the part where we explain your opponent's weaknesses so that you can capitalize on them and win the fight. This time we're hard-pressed to list any exploitable vulnerabilities, other than, we don't know, it can't survive on land? So there you go. To defeat the Megalodon, simply stay on land and never ever venture out into the water again. Sadly for you, that's not how this fight's going down. So just how in the world are you going to defeat the Meg? First, you're going to need protection. Really serious protection to keep those massive jaws in their 108,514 Newton bite force at bay. To survive in the water with Megalodon, you're gonna have to hijack the US Navy's DSRV-1 Mystic, or Deep Submergence Rescue Vehicle, a mini submarine currently on display at a naval museum whose job was to rescue sailors trapped in submarines up to 5,000 feet below the surface. Sporting walls made of steel several inches thick, Megalodon may have been able to crush the rib cages of giant whales in its time, but if it tries to do the same to your mini-sub, it's gonna leave with a bad toothache. Unfortunately for you, the Meg had rows upon rows of replacement teeth always ready to go, much like a modern shark. We bet many of you are thinking, okay, easy, just blow up the shark and you're done. And yes, it's true, it would be relatively easy to kill the Meg with modern explosives. Sadly, the concussive force of explosives powerful enough to actually kill a Megalodon shark will also crush the hull of your submarine, leaving you with a Pyrrhic victory at best. So while we typically believe in problem solving through superior firepower, this time we're going to tip our hat to science once again. Modern biology, to be more specific. A tiny fraction of Megalodon's size, the box jellyfish, may not look very intimidating versus a giant mouthful of oversized serrated teeth. But the box jellyfish produces what may be one of the most dangerous natural venoms in the world. Stored along the tentacles, the stingers of a jellyfish fire off when the stinger cells detect the chemicals present on exposed skin, shooting their stingers into flesh at several hundred feet per second. Even if severed, the tentacles of a jellyfish can still be dangerous and will automatically fire off its stingers if unspent nematocysts come into contact with exposed skin. Once in the bloodstream, the venom attacks the body's cells, wearing down its protective membrane and causing them to become porous enough to cause the leakage of potassium, causing hyperkalemia, or elevated potassium levels in the blood. This can lead to cardiovascular collapse and death within just 2 to 5 minutes. To win this fight, you're going to have to do some prep work, because you might be thinking now that luring the big shark into a school of jellyfish is a pretty good idea, except sharks have very tough skin, and it's all but impervious to jellyfish stings. Instead, you're going to have to get the jellyfish, or at least the stingers, inside the shark somehow. Capturing box jellies is surprisingly easy and can be done at night with the help of bright neon lights. Scientists have proven that the jellyfish are attracted to the lights, which helps explain why so many have in recent decades been showing up on beaches near big cities. The jellies have been lured in close by the bright lights of the city shining in the dark. So with a simple neon tube, you're going to fish for jellies with a net, and using neoprene gloves to protect your skin, start gathering tentacles, which is where the nematocysts or stingers are located. You want to be careful not to fire off the stingers prematurely, and with a shark the size of a Meg, you're going to need to round up a few pounds worth of jellyfish tentacles, which is not going to be easy at all. But like we said earlier, this time we're not giving you access to high-powered weaponry. For your own safety, you're going to have to go all natural and become an underwater Rambo of sorts. Now you have several pounds of fresh jellyfish tentacles, all loaded with deadly toxins, just waiting to be released. Your next step is to get it inside the shark. Much like a stinging Trojan horse full of death, sharks are not particularly picky eaters, and as we learned earlier, the Meg was no exception. The next step is going to be to stuff fish guts full of the stinging tentacles, while being careful to avoid being stung yourself. Or we can basically just go ahead and declare the box jellyfish the de facto winner of this deathmatch. Once you've got a mess of stuffed fish guts, it's time to slip beneath the waves protected by your submersible, and then quickly release your bait into the water. An opportunistic predator with a massive caloric requirement, the Meg is going to literally leap at the chance to get in on a free feast, and within seconds is going to have an esophagus and stomach full of stinging box jellyfish tentacles, all pumping their terrible venom directly into its soft, vulnerable interior tissues. In minutes, the toxins will have caused massive leakage of potassium into the shark's bloodstream, enough to overwhelm its natural filtration process, which will lead to a massive and very sudden heart attack. Congratulations, you just scienced the crap out of a victory against the most formidable predator ever to stalk the oceans, proving once again why humans really are the apex predator, at least until sharks team up with jellyfish to keep us out of the water forever. Because despite very fine mesh anti-jellyfish nets, stings from deadly box jellyfish are on the rise all around the world. Imagine it's late one night and you're lying in bed, resting after a hard day's work. As you're trying to doze off to sleep though, you think you hear the shuffling of tiny little feet. Peering curiously into the darkness, you can't seem to make anything out and lay your head back down to sleep. But suddenly there it is again, the quick pitter-patter of tiny little feet, followed by a mischievous snicker. This time you're sure there's something there, and as you bolt upright you spot it. There, standing atop the covers at the foot of the bed, is the doll from hell itself, Chucky. This pint-sized killer has been terrorizing us since the early 80s, when the soul of a dying serial killer was transferred into the plastic body of an innocent-looking doll. Since then, he has racked up an impressive murder count, with his preferred method of killing being stabbing his victims to death with a large steak knife. Although, unlike many monsters and killers we've featured before, Chucky doesn't mind setting up elaborate traps for his victims, taking pleasure in their accidental deaths. So what exactly are you up against if you find yourself in a one-on-one deathmatch with the infamous killer doll? Out of all the monsters and killers we've put the average Joe up against, Chucky is unique in that he isn't overwhelmingly more powerful than the average person. Chucky doesn't have special magical powers to sneak up on you, isn't stronger than most people, or particularly speedy, although given his small stature he is pretty quick on his feet and agile to boot, but certainly nothing approaching supernatural powers. Chucky also doesn't have any dark or strange voodoo to bewitch you with. Instead, Chucky relies on the element of surprise, taking advantage of the fact that most of the time he looks like nothing more than a friendly doll, lulling his victims into a false sense of security with his non-threatening outer appearance. Chucky waits for the opportune time to strike before delivering a killing blow. This means that if you come across any strange dolls, you probably shouldn't bend over to pick them up and inspect them up close, because although Chucky is usually inhabiting a good guy doll, he does have the ability to jump into other dolls. So this would be a good time to start eyeing your childhood mementos and stuffed teddy bears with some serious suspicion. Chucky's second biggest strength is his cleverness. Typically, we tell you to prepare elaborate traps in order to overcome the physical or supernatural strengths of the enemies we've covered before. However, in this case, it should be you who's aware of falling into one of Chucky's traps. This is probably the first foe we faced where your main goal is going to be staying out of any would-be traps while trying to avoid a miniature killer doll. No easy task. Lastly, Chucky is incredibly resilient to damage of any kind. Not only does the voodoo curse keep his spirit trapped in a doll or let him transfer to other dolls, but it means that even destroying the doll itself is no guarantee of defeat. You can do massive damage to Chucky's physical body, only to have the evil spirit return later in another plastic body. And speaking of doing damage, you're going to be hard-pressed to do anything critically damaging to what is essentially a plastic doll. Shoot an arm off? He'll just pop it back in. Melt his face? Chucky doesn't need to see. Blow him up into pieces? Well, actually that might buy you some time, but again, he's gonna come back. He always comes back. So how are you going to defeat a pint-sized killer inhabiting a cheap plastic doll he can simply leap out of and can lay elaborate traps, which might incapacitate you long enough for Chucky to transfer his soul into your body and yours into his doll? This is going to be a battle that takes place in stages, And as always, preparation is gonna be key. First, you want to make sure that you choose the battleground. As usual, it's always better to fight on the home turf, but it'll be especially important to deny Chucky the advantage of setting up any kind of trap. Knowing the terrain will let you immediately identify if something is out of place. This also means, though, that you need to ensure you always remain aware of Chucky's location. Too many of his victims have made the mistake of letting him slip out of sight, only to be ambushed later. To track Chucky's movements, you're going to want to plan in advance and get your hands on some cheap, easily purchasable acoustic and vibration detector alarms. Amazon has a wide selection available right now, which runs from as low as $6 up to several hundred. But you don't have to break your bank to beat Chucky. Just buy a dozen cheaper vibration detectors and spread them in the area around you. As Chucky sprints around behind furniture and in the shadows, his little footsteps will set off the vibration detectors, letting you easily track his movements. Now that you know where Chucky is, the question is, how do you kill this midget murderer? As mentioned before, we here at the Infographics Show often prefer problem solving through superior firepower. But hitting a 1-foot-tall and very fast-moving object is gonna be a challenge for even skilled sharpshooters. A sawed-off 12-gauge shotgun is an appealing choice. The wide spread of the shotgun pellets will give you a lot of room for error. And while useless at moderate to long ranges, it's an incredibly devastating weapon at close range. That sounds perfect, but Chucky's tiny body simply isn't going to be very effective, even if you turn it into Swiss cheese. A high-powered flamethrower is also an appealing option, but again, you're dealing with a foe who'll simply leave his melted plastic body and inhabit a new object, putting you at severe disadvantage as you try to guess which random doll is going to try and murder you. For the first time in the Infographics Show history, we're going to advocate for peace. Or at least not for outright obliteration. Your goal isn't going to be to destroy Chucky, but rather to imprison him. First, you need to make sure there are no suitable objects for Chucky to inhabit in the vicinity. This is why picking your battlefield is so important. Once you're sure that there's nowhere for Chucky's soul to flee, you're gonna let him come to you. But again, with your alarm system set up so you're not surprised. Chucky is ultimately still just a regular Joe himself, simply trapped in the body of a plastic doll. So while he may be reluctant to come face you after knowing he can't get the element of surprise, resorting to a few well-placed insults has been shown to be effective in the past in raising his ire to murderous levels. What seems to be particularly effective is insulting his now non-existent manhood. After all, dolls don't have boy parts, although in at least one film this point was a little bit confused. However you lure him out into the open, once sufficiently pissed off, Chucky is going to try to throw caution to the wind and come at you in full murder mode. Don't panic, this is exactly what you want, because unknown to Chucky, you've been prepared the whole time with a handheld liquid nitrogen shooter. That's right, you heard us correctly. In 2016, real-life X-Men candidate Colin Furze built a rig that shot liquid nitrogen from a backpack storage container through a palm-mounted device. Shooting a stream of liquid nitrogen at -302 degrees Fahrenheit, Furze's device can instantly flash freeze any object in range, and in this case, it'll be Chucky's tiny little plastic body. So now that you have a frozen murder doll that's as fragile as glass, you're gonna be tempted to just smash the damn thing to pieces. But again, remember that if the body's destroyed, Chucky will just come back. Instead, it's time to get creative with Chucky's ultimate fate. First, you're going to remove his limbs to ensure Chucky can't get away or manipulate objects, leaving him as just a head on a body. Unable to use his hands or feet, Chucky won't be running anywhere, and he won't be able to perform the voodoo ritual that lets him jump into a new host. Then simply hire a boat and transport the tiny armless and legless killer to a deep spot in the ocean. We recommend Lidkey Deep in the Eurasian basin of the Arctic Ocean. Unlike many other oceans, the Arctic Ocean isn't as heavily fished by drag netting, the practice of lowering nets to the seafloor and scouring the ocean bottom for fish, which might accidentally end up getting Chucky into someone's net and possibly somehow letting him find a new body. We want to make sure nobody ever sees Chucky again, so the 17,880 feet of the Lidkey Deep is our best bet. The sass-mouth, web-slinging superhero, probably one of the most iconic characters of modern American media and instantly recognizable around the world. With super strength, danger sense, and the ability to fling webs, and some seriously unresolved dead uncle issues, Spider-Man slings across the streets of New York City fighting crime. But what if you were locked into a one-on-one deathmatch against the web-slinging superhero? What chance would you have, and how could you overcome him? Hello and welcome to another episode of the Infographics Show. Could you defeat it? Today, we're pitting the average Joe up against Spider-Man. Spider-Man was created by the legendary Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, first appearing in Amazing Fantasy number 15 in August 1962. Stan Lee would go on to say that the inspiration for Spider-Man came from a desire to create a character with whom teenagers could identify, and cited the non-superhuman pulp magazine crime fighter The Spider as an influence. Although teenage superheroes at the time were given names that ended with boy, Lee wanted to change the character to age over time, and thought that the name Spider-Boy would have made the character sound inferior versus other superheroes. As the character headed to print, Stan Lee was responsible for bringing the character concept and story to life, while Steve Ditko drew the costume, came up with the wrist web shooters and the spider symbol. Spider-Man was an instant success, with his first appearance in Amazing Fantasy being one of Marvel's highest-selling comics at the time. On March 1963, Spider-Man went primetime with his own solo comic dubbed The Amazing Spider-Man, eventually becoming Marvel's top-selling series. But who exactly is Spider-Man, and what would you be facing if you took him on? An ordinary high school student, Peter Benjamin Parker was a science whiz and orphan, living with his Uncle Ben and Aunt May. One day, he's bitten by a radioactive spider. This was before it was widely known that the only superpower radiation gives is cancer. It acquires agility and strength proportionate to a human-sized arachnid. But how strong exactly is that? Well, assuming Peter Parker got the best abilities from all spiders, he would be able to jump 50 times his own body length. Norwegian athlete Arne Trevervag's world record for the standing long jump stands at 12 feet and 2 inches. But with Spider-Man's powers, he'd be able to jump 300 feet from a standing start. What about his climbing ability? Spider legs are covered in very tiny hairs, which are in turn covered with microscopic organs that seize onto tiny imperfections and surfaces, giving a spider incredible grip. However, very smooth surfaces defeat these organs, so as Spider-Man slings his way across town, he'd better make sure not to land on a plate glass window, or it'd be a long fall to the street below. Spider-Man famously has use of his spider sense, which alerts him to danger via a warning signal in his brain that triggers as pain and varies with the intensity of the threat. Spiders have a similar spidey sense, though theirs comes from their many eyes, which gives them an incredible field of view. To supplement their visual organs, spiders' bodies are also covered in tiny hairs, which are highly sensitive and perceive the smallest vibrations coming through the air or surface they're standing on. These hairs allow a spider to react to danger or prey lightning fast. Spider-Man's webs started off as wrist-mounted devices that fired off artificial webbing, but in later iterations they became biological adaptations that allowed him to do this without the help of a special gadget. As real-life spiders keep all the silk protein for web spinning in their enlarged posterior, we're not even gonna hazard a guess as to where on his body Spider-Man stores his silk protein. A spider's web is incredibly strong though, with a tensile strength 5 times greater than steel, and yet is incredibly lightweight. A single strand that encircled the globe would weigh only 1 pound 2 ounces. So Spider-Man is approximately 50 times stronger than the average human, can detect impending danger near his location, stick to most surfaces, and shoot webs 5 times stronger than steel. Should be an easy fight, right? Unlike most superheroes, Spider-Man has no obvious weaknesses except dead uncle issues, meaning there is no Superman kryptonite-like weakness to directly exploit. However, also unlike most other superheroes, Spider-Man is not physically invulnerable to everyday weapons. He can take a hell of a beating, but he's not impervious to gunshots or stab wounds or a concussion from a club to the back of the head. His healing factor works on an order of days, not seconds or minutes. So even though he's super agile, super strong, and can shoot super strong webs, he's not completely invulnerable. First off, you're gonna want to be the one on the initiative versus Spider-Man. Make sure that you decide the battleground and not him. The most important thing to neutralize will be Spider-Man's maneuverability, so lure him to a location where he won't be able to physically stick to many walls. A big open field would work, though if you have access to Lex Luthor-level wealth, then simply build a custom battlefield made of smooth glass. Magnetic boots and magnetic inserts beneath the glass would let you move around freely, while denying Spider-Man the ability to jump around and avoid your attacks. Secondly, we can't stress this enough. Forget hand-to-hand combat. He's 50 times stronger than the average human. Spider-Man could rip your arms off and beat you to death with them. Longtime nemesis Dr. Octopus may have super strong titanium mechanical arms, but one serious punch from Spider-Man would obliterate his skull. Instead, it's apparently better to let Octopus run around endangering the entire city. Let's say in this deathmatch though, neither of you are holding back, so don't get into punching range. There's several good options for you at this point. You've lured Spider-Man to your custom killing field. Mary Jane seems to always make for good bait, so we recommend that. Next, you'll have to keep out of range, meaning you're going to have seconds to kill Spider-Man before you're toast. He may not be able to web-sling his way across a huge empty field or your custom-made glass bowl, but he can still jump 300 feet per bound. You're going to need something that can neutralize a fast-moving target with the ability to do acrobatic evasive maneuvers. You're going to need the US Navy's Phalanx Close-In Weapon System. Designed to defend Navy ships from anti-ship missiles, helicopters, drones, and other fast-moving targets, a Phalanx unit consists of a 20mm Vulcan cannon, paired with a Ku-band radar system for tracking targets. It also packs a forward-looking infrared sensor for detecting low-observable anti-ship missiles via their heat generation, and a fully automated targeting, tracking, and firing computer that leaves humans out of the loop and can react in milliseconds. Designed to destroy incoming sub- and supersonic missiles, a Phalanx Sea-Whiz is more than capable of tracking and shredding Spider-Man into spider paste with a firing rate of 3,000 rounds a minute or 50 every second. But in all honesty, that's overkill, as Spider-Man has proven repeatedly he's a good guy, and that might be his greatest vulnerability. Listen, this is a match to the death, so we're gonna leave morality out of this one, but if you really want to defeat Spider-Man, just use human bait. Kidnap Mary Jane again, tie her up, and gag her in the middle of your chosen killing field. Again, somewhere nice, big, and open, and invite Spider-Man to come rescue her. Under Mary Jane's clothing, however, you will have secured and pre-armed an M60 Claymore mine, obviously facing outwards. We've talked about the Claymore before in the series, but probably because in all honesty, it's just the best at killing pretty much anything. Spider-Man will sense danger, but he's expecting a match to the death. Odds are not very high he's going to be expecting you're so cold-blooded that you're going to suicide bomb his longest-running love interest just to eliminate him. But you are, because this is a match to the death. Listen, you may not win with the ability to claim the moral high ground here, but then again, you're facing a man-spider that can punch your face off. For the more morally scrupulous amongst you though, just stick with the Phalanx. How would you defeat Spider-Man? What other superhero you want to see us take on? Let us know in the comments. Also, be sure to check out our other video, You vs. Jason. Could you defeat him? Thanks for watching. And as always, please like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.